This is Belgorod. The shelves are empty. There is no and endless darkness. There is no electricity. And worst of all, there is no hope. Iran has mortgaged its own future for Russia's war in Ukraine. Tehran, which pulled the Russian war machine out of the Ukrainian.
Well, it's been banging and banging all day. And closer tonight it banged so hard that now we...
The Russian people are no longer talking about victory, but about survival. This massive Z you see is not a victory monument. It is an ironic... On the night of February 3rd, the Ukrainian army launched a precision strike on the Frunzenskaya and Belgorod transformer stations using drones and missiles. Russian air defense systems, according to local residents, there is no longer even a power outage schedule in the... Footage from a supermarket in Belgorod further demonstrated how the Russian... Even more striking was that the supermarket's doors were left. Even the security guards refused to stand guard over the empty shelves in the freezing cold and abandoned their posts. Schools in the city have switched to remote learning. Courts have closed. However, the unrest in the city was not limited to this. Central heating systems had stopped working because the pumps were not running, and pipes had frozen and started bursting. See the images from Mokrusova Street. Shopping centers like City Mall and Megagrin have partially closed. The power outage, coupled with the inability of gas pumps to function, triggered panic among Russians. Long lines formed, but these centers have become warming stations. People have had to take refuge here to charge their phones. People now think of only one thing: escape. Belgorod residents now understand that the state cannot protect them. Our sources confirm that people are considering moving on. This physical destruction inevitably brought about a psychological breakdown. One resident sarcastically remarks, "Life as a Russian people reduced to refugees in their own land have completely..." The people are asking, if you can't protect us, why are we fighting? Iran had... If the chaos were confined to Belgorod, we might call it a local... On the night of February 3rd, the war jumped one step further north, to Bryansk. This detail is crucial, because Neptune missiles are Ukraine's own production, converted from anti-ship missiles to land-to-land attack. The outcome in Bryansk is a carbon copy of Belgorod. Transformer stations were hit. The city was plunged into... The Ukrainian army is pursuing a very clear strategy here. But when the day of reckoning comes, the only thing Putin will give Iran to strike at sensitive nodes in Russia's energy grid. These attacks send the following message to Russian society: nowhere is safe. Not only the 0 point of the border, but also 100 to 150 kilometers inside, the cities along the border are turning into ghost towns, one by one. The Kremlin is spreading the lie that the power outage in Bryansk was caused by missile debris. So why did Ukraine flip Russia's switches on February 3rd? Was this timing a coincidence? Absolutely not. This is a strategic checkmate move. One for the... It all began with Iranian President Pezeshkian's critical visit on January 27th to seek concrete security guarantees from Moscow against the looming America, where military operations are used to shape the diplomatic table. The Iranian delegation expected Russia's nuclear, or at least advanced air. On the other side of the table, it is said that there were names connected to Donald Trump's team. The Russian state do... At the very moment Belgorod and Bryansk were plunged into darkness, and the Russian people were shivering from, and especially his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. This is not just a decision not to send troops, but also the timing of this visit clearly reveals Kiev's new strategy. Shoav and Budanov and Umerov entered that luxurious meeting room in Abu Dhabi. They didn't just have peace plans in there. This statement came. They also had fresh field data, proving they could cripple Russia. How can Putin project power on the international stage when he cannot even light up his own? Kiev's message to the Trump team and the world was very clear. You cannot force us to the table and make us give up land. Moreover, this move strips Russia of its energy blackmail card. What is even more serious is that This move shows that Moscow has accepted that Iran will be attacked, even accepting this as a given and focusing solely from the sinking ship. According to reports confirming its own citizens. Bushehr is the heart of Iran's energy infrastructure, and instead of protecting this heart, Russia is choosing to take its technicians and leave Tehran. According to reports, Russia aims to reach a production capacity of 1,000 Shahed drones per day, thanks to Iranian technology. On the other hand, however, Iran's Air Force, struggling to stay afloat with F-14 Tomcat and F-4 Phantom aircraft dating back to the 19s. At the most critical moments of the war in Ukraine, when the Russian army was running out of ammunition, while Iran is greasing Russia's war machine, putting the regime's survival at risk, however, the Kremlin continually delayed delivery of these aircraft, produced technical excuses. At this point, Iran's airspace has become a free-for-all, vulnerable to Israel and the US's fifth generation. Once seen as a safe backyard between Russia received $2.7 billion worth of ammunition from Iran, but gave Iran only diplomatic calls. The Caspian Sea has been turned into a battlefield by Ukraine's long-range attacks. By striking ships belonging to Russia's Caspian fleet, this betrayal is not just a diplomatic maneuver. It means the fundamental crushing of Iran, because Russia's abandonment of Iran is not limited to not sending troops. Russia's inability to ensure security, even in its own internal sea, proves abilities. In Venezuela, the Russian S-300 Venezuela showed the whole world, and most notably the generals in Tehran, how helpless these systems. It is a disaster scenario combined with the exposure of Russian-made air defense systems as paper tigers. The Khamenei regime has for years, and Chinese-made radars deployed to protect the Maduro regime were rendered blind and deaf. Craft operated right under the noses of these systems against US electronic warfare aircraft and signal jammers. If Russian systems couldn't stop American technology in Venezuela, it's a fact that Russia avoided joining the war on Iran. Protecting Natanz or Fordo is impossible, because it knew about this technological weakness, fearing that the prestige of its own weapons. When we look at this event not only from today's perspective, but also from a historical one, we may be witnessing a repeat of Russia's habit of using and abandoning allies. This situation is an existential crisis for Tehran, because the systems protecting Iran's nuclear facilities are also based on the same Russian architecture. Moscow's reflex is to sacrifice. Just as in Syria, Russia evacuated the Syrian theater to shift Wagner forces and elite units to the Ukrainian front. What Iran is experiencing today is a larger-scale strategic isolation that Damascus previously experienced. Going further back, there are countless examples from World War II or the Cold War era of how great powers sacrifice their allies like pawns when Russia's current silence evokes the diplomatic maneuvers of the 1940s. To protect my own borders, the shoulder-to-shoulder poses struck at the BRICS or Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The axis of evil formed by China, Russia and Iran was not actually a mute. Putin's strategy may be to throw Iran in front of the US as bait or a distraction. The longer Iran resists, or the deeper the crisis, the more the West's attention will shift away from Ukraine. Every bullet given to Iran is seen as a loss for Putin. On the economic, however, this is a chess game played at the expense of Iran being gone or severely damaged. As Russia's EW systems, satellites and missiles are another reason Russia cannot help Iran is that its own house is on fire. Ukraine's systematic attacks on Russian oil providing economic or energy support to Iran has become physically impossible. With Moscow's oil revenues dwindling due to sanctions, yet Tehran needs cash, fuel, and real weapons. In a scenario where, for those who remember Russia playing a similar scenario in Syria, withdrawing the psychological impact of this abandonment is creating a significant demoralization and wave of panic within the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Russia, which left Armenia alone against Azerbaijan, fed for years with propaganda about the great-king Assad. This is not a new movie. Allied betrayal is not an exception in Russia. Russia's move is destroying Iran's strategic depth and withdrew blood and resources to the fullest on the Ukrainian front. However, Ukraine's strike on Russian ships in the Caspian Sea showed that even Moscow's, at that fateful moment when Tehran faced an existential threat, it locked its doors and drew its curtains. The packing of suitcases by Russian technicians in Bush, but the end of an era. Vladimir Putin's message is clear. Russia's interests come before the survival of its allies. For Iran, this lesson means a loneliness that will come at a heavy price. There are no guardian angels in the sky, only the approach. And when what are your thoughts on this matter? Please share your thoughts in the comments. The axis of evil was not broken. It was sold by its very. Iran is now alone. And this loneliness ended at the first whiff of gunpowder, been sealed by Moscow's cold betrayal. In the end, Moscow had turned the Baltic Sea into a hybrid warfare laboratory.
As we can see behind me, we have the Russian vessel here to the right, about 1,200 to...
Listening devices hidden under oil tankers, saboteurs disguised as fishing boats, and spy ships scanning the seabed. From St. Petersburg to the English, it cut undersea cables, jammed GPS signals, and held Europe's energy security hostage. But there was one thing Putin didn't count on. Helsinki, Stockholm, and Berlin were determined not to give Russia any breathing. There is the Iron Scandinavian Bloc, using Coast Guard vessels, special operations teams, and international maritime law as deadly weapons. Russia's famous shadow. His plan was simple: stay in the grey zone and avoid detection. The ports of St. Petersburg and Ust-Luga are no longer gateways for exports. They have become massive parking lots, graveyards, where dropped anchor in that strategic strait, using the storm as an excuse. Let's go to the epicenter of the incident, the Gulf of Finland. On the night of December 30th, the Russian ship The target was no coincidence. The ship severed the ELISA data cables and pipeline in the captain's cabin. The logbooks were seized in international waters on charges of sabotage, and the crew was handcuffed. This was a first in NATO history. A Russian state vessel's immunity shield was breached that night. This blockade is not just a matter for the police and Coast Guard. There is a massive military deterrent behind it. Finland is deploying one of the regions with its newly acquired 64 F-35 stealth fighter jet, Finnish and 62 F-18s. The Stockholm side, meanwhile, has requested a full support ban from... In other words, they are demanding that Russian ships not even be given water in ports. The Scandinavians have adopted a zero tolerance against Russia's years of hybrid threats, espionage, and airspace violations. This wall in the Baltic is not made of paper, but of steel. Germany didn't pull the trigger, it used a much smarter weapon. The moment the ship entered German waters, it found itself facing the fully armed German Navy. This shockwave in the north. You have no insurance, your ship is scrap, passage is prohibited. Law. The cold order came over the... If it didn't turn back, the Russian captain helplessly turned the ship around 180 degrees. This was the first time Russia's logistics line officially collapsed with that U-turn. While Germany locked the door in the south, the ship and its cargo of ammunition were trapped in Swedish. You're staying here until you're fixed. Russia's cunning did connecting the UK to the US, Canada, and Europe. But this time, when the Russian ship Sinogorsk anchored in British waters, defeated in the Baltic, Putin this directly on top of critical undersea cables, thinking it could accidentally cut them. Now there was a zero-tolerance doctrine in place. The Russian ship Sinogorsk anchored directly on top of transatlantic. However, the sabotage attempt in British waters was met with an immediate